listening to the best of the Martha Zoller Show. To hear the full show each day, tune in to AM 550 and FM 102.9 WDUN or log in to accesswdun.com and click the Listen Live button from 9 to 11, Monday through Friday. Joining me right now is Representative Brent Cox. He's one of my favorite people in the legislature. I'm so glad that I got a chance to get to know him. And so we got him in here for a little while to talk work of politics. We'll talk a little bit about this. We're going to talk a little bit about Israel, and we're going to have a really good time. Brent, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
So tell us, this was such a great story. And I think my dad was a POW in World War II. And so anytime I hear something like this, I worry, are they going to get captured? What's going to happen to them? But we go in and we leave nothing behind. And there are some people out there, and I use that term people loosely, that are like saying, oh man, you would waste this much of equipment to go and protect this guy. And I heard somebody explain it because they had to go back, any planes that were shot down, whatever. It is common practice that they go back in and destroy anything that was shot down because you don't want them to get, unlike President Biden, who let all of our equipment get in the hands of our enemies, you do not want to have your equipment get in the hands of your enemies. And so you destroy the equipment. But the equipment can be made in a year. The pilot is a creation of God that's had he's a colonel, he's had at least 20 years of training. And that's not something that's replaceable.
I totally agree. When I was reading, I'm sure more details will come out, but it was my understanding that they also had 2 planes land to try to get him out, but then they got stuck in the sand or the ground, so they had to come with some additional ones, blow those up, have the other ones to get him out. So the efforts made by President Trump and our military to save this life was just unprecedented, incredible. Well,
and the CIA created a diversionary, so they thought that they were rescuing the guy over in a different location, and then got to him. So we're going to learn a lot more about this guy. But, his first transmission, they have this, it looks like a walkie-talkie, but it's a lot more than that. A C-cell is what it's called. They have this thing that's hooked to their vest that they communicate with. And it's not so much they talk into it or anything like that because you don't want to call attention to yourself. But it sends back information. Are they wounded? Are they moving? Are they hidden? Where are they? But his first transmission was God is good because he was shot down on Good Friday. Right. And so that's kind of the way they know it's him. Do you know what I mean? That as opposed to maybe somebody picked it up and is trying to do something with it. So there are layers of this training that I think none of us could understand. Right. You and I have both been to Israel where we've interacted with the IDF, and I've been on military bases many times. There's a lot of levels of training that we know nothing about and we don't need to know about.
Correct. Absolutely agree.
Correct. So I'm excited about this, that he's okay. I hope that his injuries are not severe. And, I visited enough guys at Walter Reed Hospital when the Iraq War was going on. He and his co-pilot, he was the weapons guy and the pilot, they're just thinking, when can I get better and get back to the game? That's the way they are.
Yeah, exactly. And, I look at this whole situation, I'm just thankful that it appears, we'll see, it appears also the strait's going to be opened. I think after some pretty intense threats yesterday and probably behind the scenes, I know it's probably even much greater, but hopefully we're getting to a place of a ceasefire, and we'll see how that plays out. But, Iran's leadership needs to wake up, and let's get this figured out.
What I always worry about a ceasefire is that, evil people use ceasefires as a way to rearm and reorganize, and we need to make sure that doesn't happen. But it was good news out of Islamabad today. The Pakistanis are helping. It's disappointing to me that, and Marco Rubio put this very clearly over the weekend. He said, look, the idea of NATO is that not only will we help protect NATO countries, but that when we need their help, they help us. And right now, they're not doing that. And that doesn't mean, I don't think it's going to be the end of NATO, but I think that NATO will be restructured and will be looked at, and that we're going to have a different kind of leadership in some of these countries, because I don't think it's a lot to ask. We weren't asking them to commit their troops. What we were asking them for is to be able to use their bases and their airspace, and we should have been able to do that.
Correct. Also, I see NATO and actually the UN, both of these organizations, a lot of times when we're in situations such as this and some issues all the way back to October 7th, we've learned a lot about things have been brought to light in the organizations and the places that need to be resolved. And I 100% concur that NATO needs some adjustments, as well as the UN needs some major adjustments.
Well, and the UN finally released a report acknowledging what happened on October 7th to the women of October 7th that were killed and murdered. Finally, this was 2 weeks ago. They finally acknowledged the rapes, the violations, the beatings, all the things that happened. I mean, what did it take them, 2 years to do it, 2.5 years to do it? And then they have also finally acknowledged, the UN has acknowledged that maybe those numbers coming out of the whatever it was called, the Hamas, health ministry or whatever they called it, that, most of the people that actually were killed were combatants and not children and families like they were initially saying. So the UN looks like they're trying to be on the right side. And you know what it took was Arab countries, the Arab countries coming around and saying, hey, we need more from you. Now, I don't know if that's going to save the UN or not, but it's very interesting to watch.
When we were in the Hezbollah tunnels and literally outside the Hezbollah tunnels on the Israeli side looking into Lebanon, right next to where Hezbollah flags were flying were the UN buildings. So a lot of the things that I personally got to experience in the multiple times I've been over to Israel was disturbing, because I was not expecting to see an Ayatollah photo next to a UN building, next to Hezbollah flags. And the good news is this is continuing to be brought to light, and I truly believe maybe they're making some shifts. They're having to at this point, but ultimately we've really got to take a strong look at the UN.
Tell folks exactly what you represent, because it's an interesting area.
Sure. So I represent District 28, which is the city of Cumming in Forsyth County over towards Sawney Mountain, comes across Browns Bridge, which comes into Hall County over Lake Lanier, and then I represent both sides of Browns Bridge to McKever Road and back up to Dawson Highway, Highway 53. So pretty much the lake community and then the city of Cumming in the northeast part of Forsyth County.
So how was the session for you this year?
Well, it had a lot of great moments, a lot of surprises, and I thought it went well.
So what were the great moments?
Well, to me personally, one of the great moments was an individual got into the governor's race who was Rick Jackson, which I quickly endorsed in like an hour. And someone said, I can't believe you did that. So I can't believe you did it in an hour. I said, well, if my strategist could have done it in 30 minutes, it would have been faster. I've known Rick Jackson and what he stands for, and I'm a strong believer in who he is and what he's about.
What do you think was so, because it was earth-shaking, and I've done several interviews on this. He's also been here, and we're going to have him, we had him on Friday, and we're going to talk to him some more. But he, first of all, he kept a secret, right. Okay, which never happens in politics. People hear about it. I mean, we trade on the fact we get information before other people do. I mean, he kept it a secret. He is, the only complaint I've heard, well, two things I've heard. Good thing is so many women, the minute they heard that commercial, the first one, they were like, I'm going to vote for him. And we haven't seen that since Johnny Isakson. I mean, Johnny Isakson was that kind of guy that could get 6 or 8 or 10% more of the female vote than the average Republican. Okay. And these are not women. The women I talk to are not women that go to GOP meetings or anything like that. They just showed up to meet him at Longstreet or wherever he shows up, number one. Number two, the only negative thing I've heard is that they feel like he's gone too negative. And I asked him about that on Friday, and he said, look, I haven't started a fight, but I'm not gonna be attacked and not push back. And I think that was a good answer.
Yeah, I think his style is really important because he's just a leader. When I look at it, if I take away all personal opinions of any candidate that's currently running, and I have some friends that are also running.
Oh, yeah, me too.
My ultimate perspective is, if I'm hiring a CEO to run a business, who would it be? And I know in the state of Georgia that we have a lot of issues with in the world of DFACs and foster care, and we have issues with there's issues within our school system. We've got issues as well with mental health and those areas, rural hospitals and some of the places. And when I look at that, I'm like, well, this is a pretty easy choice for me because I know he has experience in these places and that he can lead.
Now, what happened when you endorsed Rick? I mean, did you get threats from anybody? Or, I'm not going to ask you to name names, but I had friends of mine that reached out to me and said, I'm getting these nasty text messages from people. And, of course, if you're texting someone, don't text them something. I don't do anything but logistics in a text message because I think that's inappropriate. But did you get threatened or anything like that?
I would say more, there were some subtle jokes and things like that happened. And, you just take it.
You didn't hear from the lieutenant governor?
I will, if I did, I would let him say what that's about. I don't really want to reveal that.
Yeah.
But the important piece to this, and I have respect for Burt Jones as well as Chris Carr and Brad. And ultimately, my choice is fully behind Rick. When I look at the situation, how it's laid out, different people have been loyal to different candidates. So the only response I give any of them is, look, as I'm loyal to Rick Jackson, I expect you to be loyal to yours, and I respect your choice. So I'm asking you to respect mine.
We're talking to Representative Brent Cox, who is a unique person in the Georgia Legislature. He approaches things differently. He looks at things differently, and he comes to decisions, I think, in a different way than most people that I meet. This is why I like having him on. So were there any big bills you were behind or tried to get passed that got passed? Well,
yes. So obviously the literacy bill was one that was a speaker initiative, as well as Ms. Dell. Bethany Ballard, she was the one who's heavily pushed literacy and has been the chair lady of the subcommittee for education in literacy. Ultimately, Chris Irwin, who chairs our education side, he ran that bill. But the literacy struggles in the state are something that needed to be addressed. And fortunately, it got passed at the last hour on sine die. So thankful that got through. That was a big one.
So here's my concern. And I serve on the State Board of Education.
Right.
And I have voiced this concern in the meetings, and I've become kind of I don't know. I get criticized a little bit because I asked a lot of questions about the screeners last year. Everybody was thinking, oh, these screeners, that's the end of the world, meaning that's all we need and that's what we got to do. And I'm saying, no, a good teacher and being able to have the right amount of staffing where a teacher can look a kid in the eye and teach him how to read is the better thing in my view. Okay, so I'm not all about the technology. Not that we don't. I'm not saying I'm anti-technology, but I don't think it's the most important thing. And we passed this literacy bill 3 years ago. And in my opinion, my humble opinion, I think it's been bureaucratized too much, where there's 40 different committees that are meeting and trying to implement the bill. And there's a literacy commission. But nothing has happened on the school level yet, and it's been 3 years. And Mississippi turned things around in 3 years by just teaching every teacher how to teach phonics and letting them go teach phonics. That was basically all there was involved in it. And I get criticized. The people from DOE, which, obviously I'm on the state board, but the people from DOE say, oh, but Martha, you don't understand. Here's what we've been doing and the blah, 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 So I want to make sure if we're passing this, that we get it in the classroom and we get it done. I'm sorry.
we agree on that completely because we need boots on the ground in the classroom and these kids. And look, I have a granddaughter. She's 6. She's in first grade, and she's been struggling herself with being able to read and sound things out. And so just this weekend, she came up and said, "Pops," and she sat down, and I had her start trying to read to me, and she's sounding it out. She's doing phonics. So the nice thing is, at least in the school that she's located, that this is some of the stuff that they realize, all right, she's not on pace, although she is quickly catching up. So that's a great thing, because it's the simple thing that you just said. I would like to see the teacher simply teach phonics and help the students learn to read, and not just read. I'm a big believer that we say literacy. Literacy also means coding, science, because we need kids to become technologically literate, and they can do that with simple blocks. They don't have to use computer, because we banned the cell phones, K through 12 now, but in the classroom. And ultimately, I want to see kids become literate in the world of mathematics as well, which is something that I'm all about.
So, and math is I always say this too. I get in trouble for that too, as I say math is no different than reading. We would never let a kid say they're not a reading kid, but you will let them say they're not a math kid. Jeff in Oconee said, please thank Brent Cox for being a great advocate for high school athletics in Georgia.
Thank you for that, and huge proponent of all athletes in the state of Georgia. I think it's very important that we pave a path forward, and I think we had a bill this year, interesting, he brings this up, and it had to do with absenteeism, and we were attempting to put the hammer down on kids that are not in school. And Martha, you and I may disagree on this, but I have a different perspective, and I was a no on this vote on some of the consequences if you're not showing up to school. And some of those were extracurricular activities, driver's license, and interscholastic athletics. And I'm a strong believer that extracurricular activities, interscholastic athletics, literally can help a child or help a student be in school and give some discipline to them. I actually would be a proponent of making it requirements for extracurricular activities, because I think sometimes that connects the kid, because they get really bored or stuff's happening in their life. These kids don't want to be in the classroom. So we've got to find a way to bring them back to the classroom and give them a reason to have hope to be there.
Yeah, my husband, I was a little more of a hard line on this initially, that, throw the book at them. If they don't go to school, they got to go to school. But my husband brought up the extracurricular stuff, that what it was when he was in school, it wasn't a state law. I don't know if you need a state law to do this,
I agree.
But that when he was in school, he played football at Gainesville High School, and, you were required to have certain grades. You were required to be in school. You were required to do that. And because he wanted to play on the football team, I mean, not that his parents would have let him stay home, but still, you can see where that would keep people going to school. I remember interviewing Tommy Nobis years and years and years ago when they moved the Falcon facility here, and he talked about how he came from a pretty poor family, and that football was what kept him in school when he was, because it was after school, and so his mom was always working, and so he kept his grades up, and he did the other things he needed to do so he could stay on the team. So I do think there's a way to put those things together, where you say you need to come to school and here's what the consequence is, but your goal should be keeping kids in school, not keeping them out.
Correct, and that's the piece to all of this. Everybody knows that we do have a problem with kids not being in school, and the question is, how do you solve it? Do we police them and then all of a sudden put the hammer down, or do we find ways to engage these kids to want to be in school and learn? And I think the discipline piece that comes from extracurricular, I think it's instrumental in a young woman and man's life,
especially for boys.
Right.
Especially for boys. So it looks like the tax bill passed, the income tax bill passed, correct?
It did.
And the property tax bill did not.
It did.
Okay.
Ironically, at about 1:00 in the morning. So,
okay.
So we finished at 1:30, and I ended up getting home at about 3:00 in the morning. Sine die. So the income tax piece did pass, which ultimately is going to give standard deductions. I'm reading here, $24,000 to $36,000 for married couples. Standard deduction for singles, $12,000 to $18,000. So that did pass. So property tax bill was voted down in the Senate, which was handled by Shaw Blackman, who is our Ways and Means chair, and a lot of input from a lot of different people to get that corrected. And it had a cap on how property tax could be handled. So it was voted down. It was then put on, I'm thinking it was 12 or 1 o'clock, on SB 33, which was a bill that was handled by Chairman Robert Dickey, Agriculture, that was getting rid of synthetic cannabinoids out of stores no longer able to be sold. So that was a really good bill. I was on that study committee this past summer with Robert Dickey and Dr. Mark Newton. And the one thing that we definitely learned is we needed to get rid of synthetic, which is basically we're doing the medical marijuana and hemp and all the legislation we're working on. So that was over there. So they stripped all that language out in the Senate, which was strange. I thought maybe they'd leave it in. And they replaced it with the same property tax bill, but they removed the cap. So it did pass. It came to us. At that point, we have to agree or disagree. So I don't know necessarily that I liked how it was presented, but it was do something or do nothing. It was better than nothing and something to build on the next year. So
it's crazy because can you really know what's going in and out of these bills when y'all are, doing it from, like I did lawmakers until 8 o'clock. So this all happened after 8 o'clock.
Right.
Can you really know what's going on when it's back and forth like this over 3 or 4 hours? You're just hoping you don't vote for something bad? Is that what it is?
Well, the process is interesting for sure. So different people have different methods in how they do it. I tend to keep my phone sitting on my desk playing the Senate and literally have the closed caption on so I can read what they're doing while we're having a bill presented, because a bill that they agree to may come back and you do an agree disagree. You may or may not know fully what's in it. You can, because you can ask the questions, or it's put on your desk what the changes are. And it's a challenging process the later it gets, because things get put on your desk and you've got to yay or nay. And a lot of times you'll see more nays coming from people because if they're not fully sure, sometimes they'll just vote no.
Well, I think that's a good thing.
Sure, I don't disagree.
If you don't know what's in a bill, you shouldn't be voting for it.
Correct, I don't disagree.
That's right.
I don't disagree.
So on a different subject, Josh from East Hall said a family member who is a retired Air Force and still works at Moody Air Force Base in Valdosta told me that pararescue personnel carrying out the pilot recovery in Iran were from Moody. We should all be so proud of our military members from our state doing such amazing work in this rescue operation. That doesn't surprise me because we do have, well, at the time of the Iraq War, these numbers may be different, but I think roughly about a third of the people who were in the military at that time were based. They weren't all from Georgia, but they were based out of Georgia because we have such a huge number of people that are on military bases here in Georgia.
Our military presence across the globe is incredible. I know. And thank you for sharing that. I'm assuming you said he's from Rabbit Town. Is that what I'm hearing? East Hall?
East Hall,
is that where he is?
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Right.
East Hall.
Thank you for sharing that. It's really important that we get more info on that. So hopefully if you have more intelligence on exactly how that went down, that would be helpful. I haven't heard that yet, but look forward to it. And I'm just hopeful that we continue to lead in the state in our military as well. I know UNG has, how many generals are out of University?
I know, a lot. It's a lot. And we're still trying to get a president to come and speak there for their commencement, because they kind of forget that college. I mean, they always rotate the military academies, but even though UNG is not a military academy, it graduates the highest number of captains of any of the military schools. Right, but we would love to do that.
Incredible.
But it's very interesting. Oh, and I got an invitation to the King Charles joint session speech later on in the month in Washington, D.C. So I'm kind of excited about that. I don't know if I can logistically make it work, but I'm going to try to do that. I'm just going to take a point of personal privilege here to end out this segment. My father, as y'all know, was a POW, and one of the biggest disappointments I've had with President Trump is how he talked about John McCain back in 2015. He said that, he didn't like people that got shot down, or he didn't like people that were captured or whatever. I mean, I don't remember exactly what he said, but it was really inappropriate because he was running against John McCain at the time, and he just said something that came out of his mouth that was something like, I don't think people who get captured are heroes, or something like that. Mr. President, this would be a great time for you to call up the McCain family. You don't have to do it publicly, but you've just spent like 3 days praising these two guys that got shot down, and they weren't captured. But it would be a good time for you to reach out to the McCain family and kind of say you were sorry about saying that. I know that's not his personality, but I think it would be a good thing to do. So I'm just throwing it out there. I know some of you people think that I dwell on things, but I thought about that when he was talking so glowingly about these pilots and thinking, that's John McCain. That's anybody who served. You may not agree with his politics, but that has nothing to do with his service. Brent and I knew each other before October 7th, and but after October 7th, when both of us kind of got so moved by what happened in wanting to learn more about Israel and do more with Israel, we got to know each other better. And so we are both really good friends with Anat Sultan Daydan, and she was the former consul general for the Southeast for the Israeli consulate. And, and I like Eitan Weiss, too, that's come. He's great. He's not as available as Anat was, but I understand they're in a little different wartime and they want to be sure about things. But right now, Israel is our ally in this war with Iran. We should be hearing something about maybe a ceasefire coming up in that. But what are your thoughts right now about Israel and, where we are right now with our relationship with Israel?
As the United States, I think the relationship with Israel is strong. I'm sure that behind closed doors, Eyal Zamir and Netanyahu, of course, Rubio and Huckabee, president, I'm sure that those conversations behind closed doors are a lot more interesting than we obviously are going to hear. But ultimately, the goal is simple. Israel's a place of freedom in the Middle East, and other Arab countries have somewhat jumped on board with the support, and they're a beacon of hope there, just similar to what we are here in America. So that relationship will be strong. We may not agree perfectly on everything, but overall, we know that between Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran, that these issues need to be addressed. The drones, the cyber attacks, the artificial intelligence war in Israel and the United States are two of the strongest in the world, and we've got to be first.
I mentioned earlier that the UN has finally done a couple of reports that have been supportive towards Israel, and they were actually driven by a lot of the Gulf states asking for this information. And the one report was finally acknowledging the way women were treated on October 7th, and just all the atrocious things that happened on that day, and acknowledging that it was Hamas that did it. And, it's 2.5 years down the road, but at least they're finally acknowledging that. And then the second thing was related to, the casualty count that the Gazan Health Ministry was putting out, and acknowledged that most of those folks, because the combatants do not wear uniforms in general, that most of those deaths were combatants and not women and children, which is what the Gaza Health Ministry wanted us to believe.
When we were pre-October 7th down on the Gaza-Egypt border, and we were in Polaris Razors riding in the desert, it was me and another legislator, and we were with one of the police officers and someone from the IDF. So we're seeing the Egyptian military base. We hear Hamas firing in Gaza, and we're in a Halutza community, which is literally where the desert's becoming green because they're growing things green, which is ultimately fulfilling biblical prophecy that area in the desert's going to be green, and I believe it will be. But as we're sitting there, it just occurred to me that so many people in Gaza need hope. And their population had doubled in the past 25 years, where ideology had completely been taught to half the population that's currently there, where the women are completely forgotten and pressed down. So to see the UN coming out, one, it's the right thing to do. But two, how they attacked and destroyed. I mean, it was like the viciousness of it all, because I've been back since October 7th, this past September, to see some of the very places and some of the people that were my friends that were killed. So, I don't have a huge compassionate heart for Hamas, and I do for the people. And frankly, I wish that there was a way that we could go in and help these innocent people that are there. And that flows into Iran. I mean, the same thing's true there. I mean, there's a lot of pressing down of people there, too.
We went to the Nova Festival location in November when I went to Israel for the first time, and we spoke to the police officer that actually got 200 people out of that location. That was what a lot of people don't realize, is that was kind of a serendipitous location, that particular music festival had been moved kind of at the last minute from one location to where they ended up. Mm-hmm. And so it was something that Hamas did not expect to come across, but yet when they did, they were like, oh, here's 2,000 people we can try to slaughter, which is a terrible way to look at it, but that's what they did. And we got to speak to him, and he got to work at 6:27 in the morning. He was security. He was a Bedouin Muslim that was, part of this, but that was his job. He was a security guy for this festival. And then the rockets started coming in, and Hamas started coming into the Nova Festival, and they realized really quickly that this was going to be a hard thing to secure. So he commandeered a car and started just taking people to safety. And by the end of the day, he had around 200 people that he took out of there. And I had a Star of David that I've been wearing most days. This is the cross I'm wearing today is the one that I got when I went to the 80th anniversary of the town that my father's unit liberated. They gave that to me when I went to that. So I'm wearing that today. But normally I wear Star of David with a cross in it since October 7th. And I took the one that I had been wearing for all that time to give to someone there. I didn't know who I was going to give it to. And when he told his story, I knew that was the one. So I went up to him afterwards and said, I want you to have this, because, he didn't have to do that. He could have easily have run away and saved himself and not all those other people, but he did the right thing. And I would hope that everybody would do that.
Yeah, me too, for sure. Yeah. I mean, when we went as well, I guess it was September, maybe.
Before,
September.
Yeah.
I mean, this past September we went to the same place you went, and the dumpster. I guess you got to see the dumpster as well that we did, the yellow dumpster, and the stories that are there. I guess we need to call it what it is, and it's a religious war. And the battle has to do with a place that in history goes all the way back to the creation, to Abraham and Isaac, or as the others believe, it was Abraham and Ishmael. And we have a Temple Mount there, the second temple, and now the Dome of the Rock, which has been there for quite some time. Ultimately, CBS even came out sometime after October 7th on the reason the attack occurred, and it had to do with the red heifers in prophecy. And there's red heifers in Israel and Shiloh, and the potential sacrifice of a red heifer that ultimately leads into the building of the third temple. So that's ultimately the battle that we're struggling with.
Brent Cox, thank you so much for giving me some of your time this morning. It was great to talk to you.
Yeah, you too.
Putting the talk in news talk. It's the Martha Zoller Show on AM 550 and FM 102.9 WDUN.
It is the Martha Zoller Show, and I'm here with Frank Norton Jr., and we're going to be talking about Green Street. But I want to tell a funny story before we get in there. So when Lynn and I moved to Gainesville, Lynn back to Gainesville, me to Gainesville, in 1991, we had a real estate agent by the name of Patsy Mercer.
Yes.
And I remember her telling us that we shouldn't look in certain areas because they're going to be building the connector through there, which never got built, and is being built now. But it was funny because, it's her job to know those kind of things. I'm not criticizing it all. We ended up buying a house on Enoda, on Hollywood Circle, which is the end of Enoda. And Lynn beat him down. He just loves to offer ridiculous amounts of money for real estate. And then
I appreciate those people.
Yeah. I mean, it's like that house was $94,000. This was 1991. We offered $70,000. And we ended up at $80,500, which was pretty good at that time.
Absolutely.
I mean, you can't buy an $80,000 house now, but that was a pretty good deal then.
I'm not sure you can buy an $80,000 garage.
I know. But it was a good deal, and we did the same thing. Our house in North Hall, we offered a low amount. We lost it, and then a month later, they still hadn't sold it, and so they came back, and we got it for the price we asked for it to start off with, and we've been there for 30 years. Yeah. So it's worked out great. Because I knew, folks, you've heard me tell this story, when we drove up to that house, I remember saying, man, I hope I like this house because we're buying this shop. And that's exactly what happened, and we've been there for 30 years. So let's talk about Green Street. That's another one of those conversations about travel and traffic that's been going on for 30 years, right? When I first moved to town, I remember people saying, they're going to close that post office. That was 35 years ago. It's still there. I think they're still talking about closing it, and I think they might even have a date for it, but it's still there. So tell us a little bit about the Save Green Street movement and what your concerns are and what we need to do.
Well, as a background, when I moved to town, I bought Bernal's president's house, which had been empty on Green Street. And my wife and I lived there from 86 to 91. And then one Christmas, my dad said, we need to move our office. We were down the street in another historic house. My family...
Where the fudge shop is now,
where the
right?
Fudgery is. And my father renovated the very first house to office on Green Street. So he looked at the house and he said, let's try to figure out how to move here. And so Nancy and I moved out of that house, but we've lived on Green Street since 1986, one of only two families. There's currently a major proposal to improve Green Street. We've been talking about it since 96 and maybe even before then. There are some common grounds. Let me just say that I would love to have certain things fixed. I'd love to improve the safety on Green Street, both for pedestrians and vehicular traffic. I'd love to have the stormwater fixed, and I would love to have the power lines underground. And at the same time, preserve the historic character of the street. It is the picture postcard of our community. Thankfully, it's not and nothing against Cargill, it's not the grain towers of Cargill that's on these postcards. It's Green Street. So let me talk to you about two alternative futures. The future that they're talking about now is to take this historic street, 4-lane, and turn it into a major thoroughfare. That major thoroughfare will cut down 26 trees, will damage most likely 68 other trees. It'll take 3 years of construction, and during construction, we'll go down to 2 lanes. What we'll end up with is 6-foot wide sidewalks on either side. We'll end up with larger lanes, a 5-foot grass median in the center. We may or may not have the power lines underground. That is a question. They'll fix the stormwater. They're going to tie it to one roundabout. And we're going to spend $25 to $50 million on a 4-lane road to turn it into a 4-lane road. Now, a major thoroughfare through the community. Or we could have a vision of keeping Green Street green. I have proposed to the City Council and to DOT that we start today, should have started 30 years ago, a reforestation program of the street. Hire a master planner for meandering sidewalks in between the signs, in between trees, take one side of the sidewalk off after the sidewalks are already built on either side. Take one side and build a service trench underneath one set of sidewalks, keeping other 3 lanes going, and then reverse, do the left-hand side at the same time. The sidewalk, meandering, is very pedestrian friendly. Build it on the surface rather than deep. It can be done. Brick accents. Some lanes some of it might be only 3 feet wide to preserve Lee Hawkins' front porch, and some may be 5 foot wide. But create the character, maintain the character. From that plan, I only see 5 to 10 trees that may need to be removed. And we maintain the character of the street. We have 2 alternatives. There may be other alternatives. We've raised lots of questions. Have they ever studied how the Sardis connector is going to affect the traffic on Green Street? Have they ever talked about taking Boulevard and making it a parallel road? We needed that northern arc that Patsy Mercer talked about.
Yes.
When my brother was running and my mother had passed away, in all her stuff is a 1960 Progress edition of the Times. And the number 1 issue in 1960 was a northern bypass.
Yeah, my son was home this weekend. We were going to church, and he goes, "What's all this work here?" I said, "Yeah, they're making this connector to Leadan Road, at the end of Mount Vernon, and then Leadan Road and through." And he goes, "Well, what are they doing that for?" And I said, "Well, I think the idea is that the Mount Vernon traffic that's going to turn left to go into town, that some of it will go across because they're going to that side of town, and that it will not go through town." Now, habits are hard to break, even if you do build new roads, okay? But that's the idea of that, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, yes.
Absolutely. And the poultry farmers that live on that side will be able to bring their goods and services to the Fieldale plant via that connector. But
right.
No one's ever calculated that into the equation of how it affects Green Street.
Right.
Yes, we do need to not save Green Street. I'm now rephrasing that and saying keep Green Street green.
Yes.
And so, yes, there's a grassroots effort. I applaud the Redbud Project and Kimberly Pills and a number of other people who are pitching in, putting up signs. I understand there's an organized effort this week to put ribbons on all of the trees that are going to be taken out or to be damaged, and bluebirds. Now, this is really interesting. So during this whole process, I have had a number of people who have reminded me of the past efforts to save Green Street. My uncle and aunt in the early 1970s created all the back paperwork to turn into a historic district. And that saved the houses on the street. And then a lady named Laura Whitehead heard that the the Georgia Power were going to cut down major limbs. Martha, as a child, I remember the canopy of Green Street going end to end and covering the whole street.
Yeah.
So Laura Whitehead and a bunch of her friends put yellow ribbons on all of the trees and bluebirds in the trees, and the bluebirds were crying. Where are the bluebirds going to be? So the bluebirds go back up this week.
Well, I sort of have always said that Green Street is only a 4-lane road because of paint, because it's really not quite wide enough to be a 4-lane road. The only, knock on Formica, the only wreck I've had in the 30 whatever years was I was turning right out of the road by Dr. Hawkins and turning right. It was raining like what, and I was in a fairly small car, so I don't think I went into the next lane, but another car came along and clipped me. I was clear in the lane I was going in, but the next to me ended up clipping me, and it was pouring down rain. That's what I remember about that. No one was hurt. thank goodness, but it's not an easy road the way it is now. And I hate losing the character of it. It's going to be different.
Well, this alternative plan, my suggested plan, takes the 2 sidewalks on either side and adds it to the 4 lanes. I don't have a problem with banning left-hand turns. Let's try banning left-hand turns. I don't really have a problem with a 1-foot wide concrete median down the middle. But having a 5-foot grass median to catch all of the cigarette butts does not make sense on that beautiful street, much less having sidewalks another 6 feet on either side.
We're here with Frank Norton. We're talking about Green Street. Let's go to the phones now and talk to, who is that? I can't see that far. Kimberly?
Yeah, we've got Kimberly in Gainesville.
Kimberly in Gainesville. Hey, Kimberly, how you doing?
I'm great, Martha. How are you doing?
Good.
This is Kimberly Pills with the Redbud Project, and I just wanted to add to what Frank is talking about. And the questions that we've had are, has the DOT or the city done an environmental impact study? How would this affect tourism? That's really important to our area, especially considering places like Bernal advertise the historical nature of their campus and Gainesville and how great it is for students. I'm sure other businesses in our town also advertise that, about how special it is. And this is not just about this is about the preserving the green of Green Street. And it's also because the Green Street Plateau is on the whole plateau. All of those businesses are on the National Register of Historical Places. And that's not just because of the buildings. It's also because of the landscape. Martha, do you happen to know the history of Fruitland Nursery out of Augusta?
No.
It's the first nursery that was able to ship plants on dry ice. The founder was from Germany, and which I thought you might be interested in. And it's also that property where Fruitland Nursery is also where the Masters golf course, where the Masters is played at Augusta National now. So we also have some history with native species that are still living and thriving on Green Street that we don't want to be cut down. Environmentally, we want those to be preserved, and that's a part of history. So I just thought I'd also share with the community that type of information, that this is about our history and our charm and the buildings as well as the landscape and the trees and everything green.
Thanks, Kimberly. Thank you for calling in.
Kimberly, one of the interesting things, I went this morning and looked up Green Street, Gainesville, Georgia, and it went straight to the city of Gainesville's tourism. And there is a whole couple of paragraphs on historic Green Street and the character and the maintaining of these beautiful homes. And they themselves, the city of Gainesville, are themselves promoting the history along Green Street. I found that very ironic.
Well, and also the bigger issue has to be with, you look at the businesses that are on Green Street, how that's going to impact them over that period of time. And these are old houses. And not to say you can never do work on the road because it's old houses, but the kind of work they're talking about is going to, potentially do damage to some of these houses.
Well, it's a number of residents or owners of houses have reached out to me. We already are experiencing major vibration on these structures, and these foundations were built largely in the late 1800s and early 1900s, and so they were built on brick foundations, and they were built as residents, and so people have had to shore up those foundations, especially the ones closest to the street. The history of all of this is that at one time, this was a large pecan orchard in the 1870s, a large pecan orchard, and you can still find huge 150-year-old pecans throughout the entire district. And so we have an environmental aspect to what I would refer to as the Green Street Bernal Plateau. Very, very level, and one of the few level places as large as it is in all of North Georgia.
Let's go to the phones now and talk to Jeff in Oconee County. Hey, Jeff, how you doing?
Hey, good morning. Two things, Frank. Appreciate what you do. You keep up with stuff that a lot of people overlook, and I appreciate listening to you. Limestone Parkway, when they built that and it dead-ended into Cleveland Highway, I remember some of the Chamber of Commerce crowd, if you draw a straight line from Limestone to Linwood Drive on Thompson Bridge Road, at the time, we threw that issue up and everybody poo-pooed it, but that was much needed at the time. And I don't know if that could ever got through there because of Valley Road and Blue Ridge, but there were in some other things, but that was needed. And then also now you got to look at MLK, or what I call Myrtle Street, down on the south side and coming around to south of Noda. That's a southern loop, just like the northern arc, that we've got to look at also.
Well, there are pieces of the 4-lane already in existence. There is Noda Drive, which is 4-lane, but it stops at Noda and Park Hill, and then it stops again at the intersection of Martin Luther King, and then you take Martin Luther King, and if it was 4-laned to 129 and then 4-laned across over to exit 20, you would have an eastern loop around the town. And so there are various stumbling blocks. People lived on those streets, and politicians lived on those streets, and so they got stopped. We have allowed certain people's self-interests, and now I will say I'm a self-interest on Green Street too, but certain individuals, not collective, have stopped some major road projects.
So we got a question. I want to sign a petition on this effort. How can I do that?
Facebook. You can go several ways. We have a website called SaveGreenStreet.com. We have a posting in Facebook that is already gathered over 700 signatures in about only 4 days. Our goal is to have a couple of thousand signatures on that. We have presented those. I've had one-on-one meetings with the city of Gainesville. I urge you to talk to all city council people. We are making progress. We are having people re-examine and think. We don't want to stop some of the things that they're proposing. We want them to reconsider the impact, either the environmental, historical, or basically the overall community impact of turning a 4-lane road into a major thoroughfare.
A 4-lane road into a 4-lane road. Anyway,
don't you love that?
I love that line.
I love it.
I love it. Frank Norton.
And meanwhile, we're going to spend $20 to $50 million on a 4-lane road.
To hear the full versions of last week's Martha Zoller shows, go to the podcast page at accesswdun.com, and you can follow me on social media at Martha Zoller.